It's the Private Practice Playbook. It's the Private Practice Playbook.
Okay, well, welcome. So, every time I do a podcast, I say the same thing. It feels like I haven't done one recently. So, lots of things to cover. So, today we're going to talk about five super important things that every doctor should experience in the course of their life, and some of them don't do it. And these are kind of five really like magical things. And I want to talk about how you get them. So let's just dive into what they are. So the first one is you got to build a great team. Oh gosh. And you say that, it sounds so easy, right? And the truth is you really don't know what a great team is until you get a really great team. Everybody thinks they have a great team. They have okay teams, right? And one of the burning questions is why do I need a team? Well, for obvious reasons, by the way. And I'm going to tell you the things that I spent years helping people develop. These are challenges. You ask any doctor, do you have a good team? They all say yes, and they don't, meaning that their teams are subpar at best. And the reason it's hard to admit that is the byproduct of you. So you want to have a great team. And we'll talk about the benefits of that and why you do it. And by the way, there's a very important reason you do it. And you're going to see a theme in all of this. I'm going to tell you the five things. Then I'm going to tell you the theme. Then we're going to go back and address some of them. Okay. And so the second thing you want to do is you want to craft, create, engineer, you can say it in all kinds of different ways, what we call an incredible patient experience. Not in your view, meaning a great clinical experience, but a great patient experience, meaning that when I come in as a patient, something happens to me that is newsworthy, meaning I'm going to pick up the phone, I'm going to call a friend, I'm going to call my spouse, and I'm going to say, you got to go check this out. So 2 is we got to create an incredible patient experience. And when you think about this, by the way, these are lifelong pursuits, meaning, and the sooner you pick it up, and this is what we do, right, for a living, so I know this, the sooner you get it, and there's a cost to all these, by the way, but it's having an incredible patient experience. And then the magic is every time a patient comes in, voila, repeat, comes in, repeat, right? Okay. All right, number 3. And this is more on the personal side, but if you're a doctor and you're going to be perceived as wealthy and affluent, then you should create incredible etched memories for your family, meaning that when your life is over and you get to the end of it, you would have created amazing experiences. So I get the joy of helping clients craft great experiences for their kids. If that's educational experiences, if it's travel experiences, if it's picking up knowledge, if it's volunteering, if it's going on mission trips, whatever it might be, but that you and your family live a full and abundant life, right? Number 4, and man, this is a tricky one. This is like the trickiest, is what we call financial freedom. And, it's kind of an overused term, I'm sure. Maybe it's called financial success. Got the pleasure of hosting probably 50 clients and spouses last week and doing some work on their net worth and sort of added up what everybody will be worth in 10 years. But it's this idea that over the course of the years you practice, that an amount of resources sticks, meaning your net worth goes up, that your assets goes up, and that all the money just doesn't get spent. See, it's crazy. I've met a lot of doctors that are old and broke, and I've been able to take a lot of young doctors and to help them to accumulate a lot of assets. And then, they do all kinds of stuff. Some of them implode. Some of them just quit. Some of them can't handle prosperity. Some of them can, you get all kinds. But then number 4 is that when you get to the end of the period of time you're going to work, that you've actually accumulated some assets that will allow for whatever it is you want, right? So that's number 4, right? Which all of you should have a desire to do that. And then 5th is creating some type of a legacy. And honestly, for most people, they don't know this, but let me tell you what you probably really want. And maybe you've never been able to articulate it. So do you want to leave a legacy of success? What does that look like? No, because it's like, okay, so you were successful. Big whip-de-doo. A lot of people are successful. I was watching the Tom Brady roast that happened a little while ago. I thought it was funny, right? They were saying, they were making fun of him, saying, was it worth losing your family for that 7th Super Bowl ring, They were joking with him, but this is normally what happens. Someone becomes successful, they make a lot of sacrifices, and their legacy is not that great. So a lot of people, what they don't know they want, but I want you to think about is that you create a legacy of generosity. And that means that as a doctor you're a generous doctor, you're generous with your time, you're generous with your team, you're generous with your patients. And I would challenge you to think about that maybe that's really the thing that you would want to create. And I've seen a lot of people who just they never learn that. And it's so fun to watch doctors, particularly young doctors. In the past week, I have received 3 different texts from 3 clients that I've had for a long time, and each of them detailed for me their free day. We encourage clients to do a free day, and all 3 of them, one in Maryland, one in Reno, Nevada, and one in upstate New York. And every one of them had the largest amount of free services and total people through their free day that they had ever had. And that's really one of the great joys for me, is to be part of helping them to do that. We ask all of our clients, we say, look, doing a free day, and some of them do it for veterans, some of them do it just for impoverished people in the community, but and to be active in the community. It's one of the days people describe as one of the best days of the year. So that 5th one is to create a legacy of generosity. And that legacy of generosity can kind of take us back to number 1, right? So those are the 5, right? So building a great team, creating an incredible patient experience that can be duplicated in perpetuity, which requires maintenance and fine-tuning, allowing enough resources to create beautiful etched memories for your family from an experience perspective, accomplishing the self-discipline of ending up with assets, not just spending all the money. And then 5thly, creating this legacy, a lifetime of work of being generous to people. As I'm recording this, I'm recording it against our Practice Growth Summit poster. And in June, and by the way, all podcast listeners, we would love to have you come to the event. You can call our office, and we'll try to make arrangements to help you get there, whatever you need to do. And we'd love for you to come and see this celebration, right, of what does it look like when a bunch of really great teams get together? What's the energy like? And so in June, we'll be gathering in Nashville, and we're putting on a celebration of a lot of these items. And we've got people like, I was able to get Mel Robbins, who is a very well-known kind of female motivational podcaster. And so she'll be coming in. We've got Jesse Itzler, an entrepreneur, kind of an energy guy. We've got a couple of the folks from Chick-fil-A coming in to talk about some of the Chick-fil-A principles in regards to servant leadership and in regards to human resources. I mean, we've got a great lineup of speakers. We've got people coming in to talk to team members about being healthier and taking care of their physical bodies, because the number one excuse today is energy, which means, I just had this conversation in my office, and, we provide 24-hour a day crappy snacks. And I was like, this is not congruent with our message, right? I was like, we're going to provide healthy snacks. I mean, I got to get that right? So anyways, if you have been listening to this and, you've wanted to come, we've got an incredible event lined up. So reach out to my office, and we'll try to make. We'll actually have some scholarships available for podcast listeners, and we'll be glad to help you accomplish some of these things. So, okay. So what we're going to do now, what I want to talk about is how you get all these things. Okay, and so obviously, if we talk about number one, which is building a great team, it is usually preceded by providing that team with some incredible experiences. Like, a lot of people don't get this. They go, well, I just want to have a great team. And you expect them, what? Like, you're going to lecture them into greatness? It doesn't work that way. Teams are developed based on the experiences they have. So as being in the business of developing incredible teams, I literally have to create experiences for the teams, meaning that we've got to create university courses for teams. We've got to create coaching workshops for doctors. We've got to create these big events that just create a surge of expertise, about how to grow a business and to keep the team on the higher purpose or the higher calling of an incredible patient experience, not a self-serving journey to just getting what they want, which is what we have in a lot of offices. So when we think about number three, which was this etched memory, it's been fun over the years. We have a long-term relationship with clients, but we also have a long-term relationship with their teams. And it's so incredible to see the team members that have been afforded these incredible experiences. We have team members that for like 15 years have come to every event we've ever done because their doctor generously paid for that for them. And now these team members are the greatest advocates in those practices and practically running those practices at a level that people would only dream of. But it is because of the fact that that doctor created or allowed that experience to occur. So when we think about this, it's so interesting that you want to simplify things, right? And what I want to invite you into the idea of is this. It's very easy to essentially audit or review what you're doing. So if you just get your calendar out and you back up and you say, when is the last time I took my team or my leadership team or my key people or whatever to something that just created a massive surge of energy forward for the practice? I mean, and this is not a trick question. You could ask them the question, and the answer to that question is very telling. So if you say, well, like if the answer is, well, I think we did that one thing before COVID years ago, I'm just going to tell you right now, you got to get your you-know-what off the you-know-what and get moving to you-know-where. Like you can't just keep, you can't continue to allow time to happen. The same thing is true if I say, well, when is the last time you had an incredible experience with your family? And if you pull out the calendar, I got my computer here, I can look up, I can pull up my iCal, I can back in, and I can find when the last time I did something, right, with my family, right, that was impactful. So, if I pull up my calendar just for this year, 2 weeks ago, I'm sitting in a room talking about generosity with a bunch of generous people. 4 weeks before that, I spent a week in the DR doing a mission trip, looking at the things that our family funded down there, looking at where my kids had given money to see if the money was put into place. right? I can then back it up and I can find a vacation. And I'm not trying to say that yours should be as good as mine, but, and then you got to ask yourself the question, okay, so what about our team? Like, what's going on? Like I look at my calendar. We've got in 2 weeks, we've got a company outing, right? So we're doing a tailgate. We're going to a Braves game. We got an all-team meeting. I can back up to the Christmas party. We probably had one of the craziest Christmas parties we've ever had. None of that necessarily makes us a great, doesn't make us a great team, but it's how intentional are you on these things, right? So I thought what I would do today is to talk about essentially why you may never get these things. I mean, in other words, that there's actually a reason why some people get this and some don't. And I thought I would try to lay it out. I actually recently recorded something for my clients in this. And we have a coaching program called 5X, which is where we will literally take your practice 5 times. And the concept behind it was that it's sort of easier if you think bigger, and it sort of shakes people out of their habits. And so I want to talk a little bit about your habits. And so, for instance, if you accepted an invitation, you said, hey, you know what, I'm coming to your event in Nashville. Like, what I know is true is there may be some discomfort, you may have to make some sacrifices, but as you're walking out the door, you're going to be like, this was the greatest thing I did. And, and by the way, we don't offer CE because you can't have the greatest event you've ever been to and give CE at the same time. So just FYI for some of you that are CE junkies. So CE is great if you want to bore yourself to death. If you want to have an incredible life-changing surge of an experience, then normally CE is hard to actually give with that at the same time. So I thought what we do, right? So you got these 5 things. How come one person can build an incredible team? Like, probably the person who you drive by their office and you think, oh, they're cheating. They probably have a very dynamic team, right? They've created an experience. And I want to talk about at the root of these 5 things, why you may never get them. And I'm going to read you a few things that will help with this. But, it's interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about habits, and I want to talk a little bit about ego. And it's interesting, when you think about the word ego, right? And most people think about vanity, and most people think about the negative interpretation of ego, right? And as a matter of fact, even in the Christian circles, you hear a lot of totally incorrect things said about ego and humility and again, vanity is not what I'm talking about. So I want to read you a couple of things, right? And so number 1 is that as a practicing doctor, you have to have definiteness of purpose. And that definiteness of purpose is not just the definiteness of purpose of clinical skills, but it's the definiteness of purpose of having an incredible practice. Those are 2 totally different skills. So the clinical skill is one thing that many of you actually have a big, big, big ego about. I mean, you parade your credentials, you actually really kind of have an inflated variation of your skill. You even think you're better than other people, and you may be. And so many of you understand this. Now, what's interesting is, though, when you meet that person, sometimes they have a whopping 10 patients a month coming in, which means that they're incredible clinically, but they're just not very good at attracting actual people to experience the process of their wonder, right? So when you say, well, okay, and then I want to talk about habits. And so the reason I want you to maybe come to Nashville is you need to break your habit pattern. Like, if your habit, on the 13th, the 14th, and 15th of June, there'll be a room full of people hearing these incredible speakers, sitting down at the table, talking to the team about growing the practice and what is needed. And then somebody else will just be doing the same thing they were doing for days and days. So I want to talk about the relationship between your ego and then something that's called habit force, right? So it turns out that The reason you're good clinically is because you actually spent a lot of time learning how to be good clinically. You got trained, you built up your ego, right? And so when you think about the word ego, it actually means, in like the Latin origin is I, but it actually connotes the driving force which can be organized and made to serve as a medium for translating your desires into faith through action. So for instance, the reason you become good clinically is that you want to become good clinically. You want to be competent, okay? And so then you might be. If you're not, it's because you haven't practiced this, right? So what we want to figure out is how to take the power of thought, right? We want to transmute it, right? The power of thought into its physical equivalent. So the 5 things I said, none of them are clinical skills, okay? Build a great team, create an incredible patient experience, engineer this amazing experience for your family, live below your means so that resources are still there when you're done, and then to create a legacy of generosity. And so a legacy of generosity is how generous you are to your team and how generous you are to yourself, or really it's how generous you are to your family, how generous you are to your team, and how generous you are to your patients. So the reason you invest in the team is because that's being generous to your patients. The reason you invest in your team is that if you invest in your team, that will make your business more successful. It's a little bit counterintuitive. It doesn't make it less successful. It makes it more successful. So what is this habit force, right? So if you think about this, if you ever watch like professional golf and you see the person get up there, and I mean, they have like a golfer's body, they have golfer's clothes on, they make it look so easy, but these dudes practice, or gals practice a lot. Their habits make them exude confidence, right? Their habits make them exude confidence. Their ego, not vanity ego, the way they feel they carry themselves a certain way. So like the invitation today is to say, you know how you wanted to carry yourself clinically so that if a patient walks in, you wanted to be competent, and that's what I want. If I'm a patient, I want you to know what on earth you're doing, and I don't want you to turn beet red. I want you to say, hey, you're at the right place. I do this procedure all the time. You're going to be great. Well, what I'm saying is you got to have the same kind of swagger when it comes to the rest of the business. And this is where people are very deficient from time to time, and they need a little bit of help. Okay? So if you think about it, and in a book written by Napoleon Hill, they call this the cosmic habit force, and I don't want that to sound too weird for you, okay? But what is it? Well, first of all, it's not something you're going to learn in school. It's not something you're going to probably learn from your parents, but it's saying that habits are very connected to the human ego. Therefore, if you look at the misunderstanding about the ego, you have to recognize the ego is a medium through which faith and all other states of mind operate. So, throughout this philosophy, great emphasis has to be placed upon the distinction between passive faith and active faith. The ego is the medium of expression of all actions. So the reason you may never have any money left over, or you may never build a great team, is that you actually don't have the ego for it. Like that you would rather be in the dark, you would rather be unconsciously incompetent about it, and you don't want to apply the same formula to it that you applied to being a good clinician. I mean, a lot of you you went to school, got an education, and then after you got out of school and opened up your practice, you spend years learning other clinical stuff, because the truth is they didn't teach you everything you knew. It wasn't enough. So you had to go learn more, and you had to go learn more. And this is true with the 5 things I'm talking about. You don't learn these 5 things by you can't wish these 5 things. You can't hocus pocus. You can't even buy them, for goodness sakes. You can't just buy a good culture. You got to work at it and put the work in, and it has to be authentic and real. So when we think about this, the word ego refers to the factors of one's personality. Therefore, the ego is subject to development, guidance, and control, meaning that you actually have to develop this. You have to develop this positive ego to even begin to feel worthy of a great team. You have to, and it's so crazy that when you say to a doctor, hey, look, you've got to invest in your team because the team is an investment in your patients. And they'll look at you like, what? And you can just tell that they lack they'd prefer to believe that they're better than they are. And it's why a lot of you never go look at the really good offices, because it would frighten you to death, to see a really good office, because it might reveal that yours isn't as good as you think it is. So when we think about this, right, there are so many influences over your time, everything that you do. So the question is, and it's funny when they talk about what the body is made up of, 17 different chemical elements, right? That's it. Why is it so magical, right? So development takes place through the organized habits, which are made permanent by the law of cosmic habit force. So once you're good at doing a procedure, normally that doesn't go away. So the cool thing about all this other stuff is once you learn how to do it, normally it kind of works in perpetuity, right? It continues to work. So what we want to do is, when you think about the greatest creators, inventors, artists, business leaders, all purposefully develop, guide, and magnetize their egos within the field. That's why if you have a friend who's a client of ours, they continue to come to coaching workshops, because when they come into that coaching workshop, we're essentially doing this. We're essentially developing and magnetizing what we want. That we want to have a great patient experience. We want to have financial stability. We want to have the best team we possibly can. So one of the major differences between those who make valuable contributions to mankind and those who merely take up space in the world is the difference is ego, because ego is the driving force behind all forms of human action. So this is kind of like that. So when you're thinking about, okay, well, if the word ego is always negative to you, then that's the doctor who basically says, well, I'm an incredible clinician. They don't even say that actually, but they think it. But yet only 10 people come to me a month. Well, the truth is that if only 10 people come to you a month, you're probably not as good as you think you are. You might not even be as good. And maybe all of a sudden you got to realize, it isn't about being the greatest clinician. It's actually about the experience, actually about providing the greatest experience. Hello, wake up. I'm here to tell you that if you're a good clinician, that's great. You should be. If you're a good clinician who understands this business side of it, all of a sudden you put the two together and voila, you start to discover the magic sauce. But the magic sauce isn't just on one side. The magic sauce is the totality of it. So if you get up and you come to Nashville and you look around and you say, oh, wow, this is what happens. Okay, yeah, it's not anything weird. It's not anything inappropriate. It's that these people actually have done what they need to do to figure this formula out, just like they figured out how to be a good clinician. They figured out what the team really wants, which is what the patient really wants. And you put that on the floor, and all of a sudden the patient walks in, multiplies themselves, and then all of a sudden patients just come like crazy. So again, this idea of self-suggestion, right, attains the status of faith the ego becomes limitless in its power. The ego is kept alive and active and is given power by constantly feeding it. Like the physical body, the ego cannot and will not sustain without food. And I want you to think about that. Like, where do you think you're the best, where you have a little bit of ego, not the negative kind, the good kind, self-confidence, self-worth, things are going your way. That's the formula that we would apply somewhere else. It has to be fed with definiteness of purpose. It has to be fed with personal initiative. It has to be fed with continuous action, well-organized plans. So everybody who comes to Nashville, we're going to create a game plan book, right? A game plan book for growing the practice. You got to have a great game plan book. You have to have enthusiasm, right? Has to be fed with controlled attention. Has to be directed to a definite end. It has to be controlled with self-discipline. So it's not a recklessly abandoned ego. I mean, a wild, out of control ego that you think of. It's this manicured version of an ego that's incredibly healthy and has a pulse to it, right? And is supported by accurate thinking, not to think higher of oneself or to think less of oneself. No one can become the master of anything or anyone until they become the master of the ego. So you go back to the questions like, how do you build a great team? You master your ego. You master your ego. Actually, find it funny, like, true, when I meet a doctor who kind of gives me that old, oh, you're Jay Geier, and oh, I know what you do. Of course, I say, have you ever been a client? No. Well, then you don't know what I do. And then like they kind of imply like, well, you're just like what, all about the money or whatever. I'm like, no, not really. Matter of fact, we're about the patient. How many new patients do you have? Well, I get 10. Okay, well, so you like to claim you're about the patient, right? And really what they have is they have this ego that is saying that I'm so good that I'm going to live in denial about the truth that I'm only attracting this many patients, and really I have a crappy little practice. I mean, I hate to say it. I see this all the time. It's sad. And by the way, I'm not judging. I'm just telling you the facts. And they don't think they have an ego. Well, they absolutely have an ego. Their ego is so big that they could be going financially backwards every month, and they choose not to be honest about it and act like they're being successful. So, I mean, this is the part where I, say, like, you got to understand that is it possible that a person not doing well has an ego problem? The answer is absolutely yes. And is it possible that the person who's doing incredibly well has a great team, is putting money aside, is doing all the things? Is it possible that they have an ego, but that ego is being managed? They're holding it accountable. They're feeding it the right things. They're going to learn the right things. They're challenging themselves. And again, can all of a sudden the ego take off? Listen, I've been coaching people for 20 plus years, and let me help you with this. Man, I see it all the time. I can get them to a good spot. Every once in a while, you lose them to their ego. Sometimes they'll never come to you because their ego is so screwed up. They think so small, they're not going to ever make any changes. Sometimes you can get them feeling good about themselves, and then they implode. Sometimes you can hold on to them for a long time if they can take the feedback that their ego is getting out of check, I mean, the ego is a problem. The ego is an opportunity. The ego is a problem. And it is alive and well in every human being. And then, if you say, well, I'm a female, I don't have an ego, that's totally not true. So this applies to females and it applies to males. It's not unique to one or the other. So no one can express oneself in terms of opulence while most of their thought power is given to the maintenance of a poverty consciousness. So you're never going to accumulate financial wealth if you perceive yourself as being impoverished, right? That's not going to work. So the question is, how are you doing at manicuring and developing and nurturing what we would call a healthy ego? And then how is that ego changing your habits to the habits are so positive that they're creating this really kind of this power or this force? And I want you to be observant of this, and I want you to watch somebody who's really good at something and tell me that there's not some kind of a magical force around them. And I'm not trying to be like get weird on you or anything, but you can't deny it. And then you can look at somebody else and you can say, well, what do we got going on here? Like, where's the force? There's no force going on at all. And if you're sitting there today and you're in your practice and you're trying to figure this out, you don't really figure this out on your own. You figure this out by putting yourself in a position to receive what you need to build that process or that, and again, a lot of people are just so confused about this, right? Like, I'm supposed to be humble. I'm supposed to be this. I don't know where you heard that, but it's probably from somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. There are times you don't want to be humble. You're telling me that and remember, humility, we're not talking about, again, you shouldn't run around thinking higher of yourself than you are. You should think accurately of yourself. So if you are indeed good, meaning that you have the habits of a good person, you do the things of a good person, then you should carry yourself in that way. And you want to develop that type of a skill. You want to develop that type of a power, if you would, over things. So that may be why, and I just invite you to think about that today. And I want to extend an invitation for you to come to Nashville. And if you come to Nashville, one of the things that will happen is, by the way, Nashville is designed for the doctor and it is designed for your team, okay? And in particular, it is designed for what we would call someone on your leadership team, right? Now, if you're married and your spouse is in there, you might want to bring your spouse, that's fine. And first-timers normally come by themselves, and then they wish more than anything that they had brought a team. So you're going to probably find that you want to bring your team. And we'll put an image up at the end of this that will show you where you can go to for information about the event. But the commitment over the 3-day event is that we actually start on a Thursday. We have a long day on Thursday. We have a happy hour Thursday night, and then a long day Saturday. And then on Saturday, we're going to do a little songwriters experience. On Friday, we're going to do a songwriters experience. Then we do half a day on Saturday. And we've got some times where the doctors are alone and times that they're together. There's table time for the teams, individual teams, to work on different projects together. But the goal is to walk out with a game plan for some of the things that we're talking about. And again, to hear from some incredible speakers and to instill confidence in the psyche of the people that work for you to do the greatest job that they possibly can, and to understand that it's really healthy and it's what should be done. So we would love to have you there. I'm glad to work with any of you that have never been to our event to scholarship you to some degree to be able to experience what that's like. And I think it would give you a good sense of that. So make sure, obviously we're coming up on this thing is June 13th. So make sure that you click through, do whatever you got to do. And we'll look forward to seeing you in Nashville. All right. Take care. Bye.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of the Private Practice Playbook. For clips of this episode, go ahead and check out the YouTube channel. If you enjoyed what you heard today, make sure to subscribe to the podcast at podcastfordoctors.com to unlock subscriber-only bonus episodes. Find our links below in the description.